All right, hello and welcome everyone to our latest installment of our Scholar Spotlight series. Today we have Randy Dible with his presentation, The Theory of Absolutely Everything, Absolute Ultimate God Realization, Absolute Ultimate God Consciousness, and the utterly profound metaphysical significance of positing the infinitesimal point. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hand over the mic to Randy for this thrilling and exciting presentation. We're all pumped and ready to go. Randy, you take it away.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for this incredible opportunity. This is part of my own spiritual development. As a philosopher, I have my philosophical trajectory. I've got my status, to share with you. Randolph Dible is, what founder of the Absolute Foundation. I am a PhD student. I am a professor. I teach. But most importantly, is I'm a philosopher, and what that really means, I think, is something that gets lost in the academy, of course. I mean, we bitch about it all the time, right? Everyone's always talking about that. Um, well, I'm here to share with us today to remind us of what the love of wisdom really means, and what it could be, by the example, okay, of what I have to offer. Okay, so so it's all about the absolute infinite, what I call the absolute infinite ultimate reality. Um, Now I'm gonna I'm also going to, since we're just starting here, I'll also ask that folks mute themselves just during this like opening lecture bit, and then we'll open it up later, because I'm excited about Q&A and such. But and so if anyone is not muted, James. Oh, cool. Thanks. All right. So here's the thing. So I could tell you my like story, right? Many of you've heard this before, but it's like the trajectory, right? And it leads us to framing where we're at. This incredibly ostentatious title, right? This philosophy. What is this is it. Okay. I mean, like in the sense of what the 60s and 70s with the psychedelic revolution, was intending, and then where it was like starting to go in the early 70s with the scientific use of entheogens, not just psychedelics in the sense of like things that could expand your mind, expand your consciousness, transform, great potential for transforming the world, right? And for self practicing of the liberty of cognition, right? But I want to return us to the spirit there, and not just return us to the spirit there, but I mean to dwell there, to live from there is a phrase that I'll be adopting from Douglas Harding. And I'll tell you more about him, and I'll tell you more about why he's so important. But to not just live from the spirit, but to fully inhabit it is absolutely necessary. And I'll explain to you what I mean. I mean the spirit in the sense of pep, in the usual sense, and I also mean that in the holy sense. Um, okay, and ultimately, what I mean, just dropping all the fussing with terminology and such. Um, you know, Today is, I think, my opportunity to just say it straight, without worrying about all that stuff. So it's God. It's God consciousness, God realization. That's what the spirit is. Okay, that's what it always has been. That's what everything is. But there's a specific way into it, and that is that this thing. Okay, and I will also I will I lied. I will return to clarifying what I mean by these things here and there. So for example, God, right? What I mean is infinity. Now, what that is not a mathematical idea. Okay, it is also. In fact, all of mathematics depends on this. Absolutely. Okay, and I mean this in the most serious sense. And what I'm doing, it's also going to sound like a big joke in a sense too, because what I'm proposing is absolutely saving the world. And what I mean by that is bringing us the direct confrontation with the fact that we are already there, that we already understand, we already intuit, whatever, cognize, this thing. And what it is so you can call it God consciousness or God realization. And these terms have certain like contexts that have developed. For example, ISKCON, the Hare Krishna movement, right? It was originally going to be called the Society for God Consciousness. But Prabhupada said at one point, people don't know what that means, so we're going to call it the Society for Krishna Consciousness. And this is an important way of framing it. All of these things, and I've told myself this all along, and I tell my students this. It's all about how you frame it. It's all about how it's framed. Okay, because what it is it's so easy, so simple, so obvious and over obvious, so simple and ultra simple that we absolutely overlook it. And every stupid thing out there, the bar is low, the world is dumb, right? Every stupid thing that we're interested in, every like little desire that is not the maximum absolute infinite love, that's what this is, infinite love. And everything less than that is just not living up to its potential. I mean, just to put it lightly, to say the least. And what we're talking about is the ultimate absolute explosion of semantic, aesthetic, ethic, everything about value, meaning, significance. The ultimate significance, okay? It's like when you walk by all those movie covers at the video store back when there were video stores, right? Or you see all these books, you judge a book by its cover, right? And you hope beyond hope that it's going to be the thing, the like the ultimate scenario, the absolute ultimate meta narrative that you can't even, maybe you don't even go there. We don't even allow ourselves to like go there, but we hope it's going to be the thing, and then if like we get consciousness of the thing, right, we realize it's all about how it's framed. Like should I put it on here on this wall in my attic? And we just got this house. It's so cool. This is the attic. It's nice and empty. Zoom room. And it's impossible to put art on these walls because they're slanted. But here's a very prominent one. So what would I put here? I could put anything, right? And so what I generally do is to give it a sort of diagram, I do this, right? There's the lemniscate, the symbol for infinity, and I put the absolute value signs on it. Okay, so this is just like my gimmick. This is what I've been using as like a shorthand for my own notes since since I first was psychedelically blown out as like a 15-year-old. I realized I need a word for this. I need something to explain exactly what this is. And early on, I found, for example, René Guénon, the philosophia perennis, is something that René Guénon has a lot of literature on. So that's him. This is his book, The Metaphysical Principles of the Infinitesimal Calculus. Okay, so this is something that I was reaching for early on in order to express what I found. Okay, because what I'm suggesting is you can do this too. You don't need to have grown up in California like I did with psychedelics, going to bonfires, partying with your friends, whatever, or not psychedelic at all. For the psychedelically naive, this is just about your imagination. This is just about pushing it to the absolute maximum. And all that you have to do in order to do that, it's not a great achievement. Okay, it could be like an achievement. You can frame it as an achievement. You can frame it as something that you progress in, spiritual progress, right? And achieve success in this, but you're already there. So here's a cool quote from Ramana Maharishi. You're already enlightened. This is a paraphrase. You're already there. Um, you're already enlightened. And the trick is then like, feeling like you deserve it. Okay, I kind of messed up that quote, but it's something like that, right? It's you're already there. We already have access, unlimited access to this thing. So I'm going to give it words. So I've reached for the pen and paper. I've reached for it and I've given expression, multiple times. I mean, this is what my life is all about. Going there and trying to give expression to this thing, the thing I would put on this wall, the thing I would put in every medium. This is a heavily mediated situation, right? This Zoom. Who knows when these people in the future are going to see it on YouTube or whatever, But the message is so clear. In fact, there's no trouble of transmission at all. The transmission is absolutely seamless. And our task is now to invent an engine that runs on that transmission. And the key is this infinitesimal point. And I'm coming at this thing I'm saying from very specific contexts, which I will share. I will tell you about them. I laid all my books around here. We've got Laws of Form by George Spencer Brown. Early on, this was my key to finding something that expresses what I found and what I wanted to express. And this is also really cool because the way Spencer Brown did it was also taken by John Lilly, who invented the flotation tank. That's how I originally found laws of form. That's how other people I know originally found laws of form. And Lilly developed this way of thinking of programming and metaprogramming in the human biocomputer. So this is a model, we can call it now early cybernetic model of how the mind works and stuff, But it's useful because when you go in these like really far out states, it's you need to think of it in terms of not just programs, not just programming like, here's an object, here's a thing, and you could write a code for this and represent it, and that's like basically something like that's going on. I mean, I'm butchering it because I'm no computer scientist, but that's what's happening because of this Zoom mediated call, right? But also in my direct experience, when I'm looking at the thing, my cognition is constructing the thing. So there's cognitive constructivism, etc. There's all these ways of there's all these sciences out there, and there's all these terminologies, and there's all this word salad, and I'm absolutely guilty of it because it's necessary to know everything, every tool, every device you have to express this thing, So like the Latin infinitum absolutum, that's what René Guénon in his books was pointing out. Something I picked up on early on, there's this Thomistic scholastic distinction between the infinitum absolutum and the what he calls the infinitum secundum quid, or infinite in some secondary sense only, and that the mathematically infinite, according to Guénon, is that one. It's the, secondary one. Because what the absolute infinite is it can be mediated. In fact, everything is it, but it's also something that you can, it's direct. So there's a very directness to this idea of the absolute infinite. And what I want to do in this talk today is create this philosophy of the absolute infinite in a very direct way. Because I don't find out there in the literature any kind of anyone doing this, right? I want there to be a philosophy of infinity that is true to what I've found through my spiritual progress, right? So that's what this is about. This is about the absolute infinite, which I'm equating with ultimate reality, okay? And what I mean to do when I do that is to invoke, for instance, the shunyata, of Buddhism. For instance, in the Mula Madhyamaka Karika of Nagarjuna, there's this absolute nothingness. And this distinction between absolute nothingness and relative nothingness is something that Nagarjuna develops in that context. So we can invoke that kind of meaning of shunyata here. And as well, like das Nichts from Jakob Boehme, right? And from the whole like mystical German tradition, there's so many important resources of foundational, fundamental concepts. And my point is that, I've spent many years looking through all of these things, finding ways of articulating the greatest, highest, most ultimate thing that I could express, that I could articulate, you know. And eventually, what I found was there was an experience that I didn't know about. And when I finally had that experience in just as far back as 2024, you know, I it all came together, and this was an ultimate breakthrough. I'm not sure I've come back. I've definitely lost my mind, lost my head, lost my marbles, but in its place, okay, is the great marble, the great marble of the all, what is called the sphere of the all. Plotinus calls it the sphere of the all one, ta pantos sphiros, etc. There's all these words for it. And my dissertation thesis, it develops this, or it rather uses this, and I could have like a historical section. I do talk a bit in my master's thesis, for instance, the phenomenologies of the spheres, um, about the history of this idea of the infinite sphere. So what we're talking about, okay, just to make it really clear, because I don't want to get lost. I know, there's phenomenologists here, and I'm speaking to absolutely everybody. Not just those present in this Zoom call, but whoever could be listening to this in the future. I want to be clear that what this is about is infinity, and infinity is completely incomprehensible. I mean, we can make words for it and symbols for it, diagrams, and we can try to get creative and represent it as, the unmarked state is what Spencer Brown calls it. So for him, he doesn't actually call it infinity. He calls it nothingness. So in his other works, Spencer Brown equates this thing that in laws of form is called the unmarked state. There's nothing on my wall right now, and I'm like trying to figure out which piece of art I should put there, right? Well, the unmarked state is a perfect way of framing what this thing is, because of course there's nothing there. There's not even a frame there. But what happens in laws of form that is so utterly tremendously significant is that it's all about this thing called the first distinction. So Spencer Brown's thing called the first distinction is the ultimate frame of reference. And what it is, and this is something I came to on my own, independent of these things. It's pure self-reference, of course. So pure self-referentiality. There's so many ways of dressing this up. It's been done in so many ways. But pure self-reference coalesces into this absolute singularity. This is my proposition, okay? This is my hypothesis, and I'm also going to extend the term that Douglas Harding uses. So I'm going to tell you a bit about Douglas Harding as well. What he calls the incredible hypothesis. So for Douglas Harding, there is this thing called the incredible hypothesis, and what it is that ultimately you're God, okay? And you can test this. You can test it in so many ways, okay? And so Douglas Harding's work, especially one that just got published a couple years ago, in fact, but was an early work of his, is called On Being God. Now, I'll back off in a sec after I'm satisfied with like what I'm proposing exactly, okay? And then I'll tell you a bit more about like, where Douglas Harding's coming from, why this is important and everything, and this breakthrough experience I had in 2024 and everything, okay? So, so what we're talking about is so simple. Ramana Maharishi says, get your enlightenment first and deserve it afterwards. Jesus Christ says, when he's explaining what heaven is like, right? He says, you know, get the kingdom of heaven first, and then all these things will be added. So what we're talking about is something that's over obvious, which is why it is so tremendously significant how it is framed. It's so important, okay, in a personal spiritual sense, but for humanity, or rather, for for everything. It's so important how it's framed. Okay, here, I'll do a guided meditation, right? Picture this, we can call it the vast void, or you might picture like the clear white light of the Dharmakaya, right? This vastness of just nothing. Okay, when we say nothing, we might picture like a little black shadow, with no border, a hazy, fuzzy black shadow or something like that. That's, I think, classically what we do. And we can do that as well and apply that to right here to the viewer. And when we go looking back at this viewer, we can find that kind of image in our heads when we think about it. But when we actually look, then we find the real thing. So this is what Douglas Harding's work is all about, is how you find that the person, like these little Zoom people head face things that we normally think of ourselves as, is third person. And behind the third person is the first person. And that ultimately what the first person is, it's headless. So this is a very powerful thing. With Douglas Harding, you find that you have no head. And then what this headlessness is replaced with is, well, the world, okay, everything that you're experiencing is what's going on right here. But when you try tracing that, when you try seeing that, what happens is your head is replaced with God. And what this God consciousness, or consciousness, what this thing is it's infinity. So let me get clear again on exactly what this talk, what this philosophy and everything is about. It is about infinity. And what that is the whole shebang, from pure and radical nothingness to absolutely everything. And not just absolutely everything if you're picturing like, everything, but more than that. So it's going through the entire spectrum, and it's happening infinitely fast. And everything is included in that way of putting it. So I call that the whole shebang. So it is like the Big Bang, but it's way bigger. So it's to the max, right? It's the maximum of that. And that is something that we think of as happening like, from a singularity point, right? A cosmological singularity. Well, that's what this is, this pointing, this ultimately, if you push it all the way, that's what this pure infinitesimal point is. So I use this symbol as a way of identifying, for example, Nicholas of Cusa makes this distinction between the absolute infinite and the unity of the absolute infinite. So this absolute infinite unity is fundamentally different. It is the great order of being that is different from infinity. Okay, so what this is beyond being. So let me just lay it out. I'm going to use my fancy words and concepts and my very specific concepts, just to lay out my thing, to frame it and deliver to you the message of like, these laminated thingies, right? So there's the absolute infinite, and that's pure and radical nothingness, but it's exploding infinitely fast into absolutely everything and more. So insert the Gnostic pleroma, this overwhelming overfullness, this overwhelming overflowing is what there is. And there's many aspects to this. Another important way of understanding what that is it's actually love. Okay? It's truly what love is, which is the self-giving. It's infinite self-giving love. It's in the giving. You can picture it like in the receiving and the enjoyment of absolutely everything as well, but it's this dying and giving of this pure life. So the transmission is that of the spirit of this. It's through this. So you can picture it, when you try to imagine it, you can picture it like there's this boom, absolutely everything. It can't even grasp itself. So you can't grasp it. No one can grasp it. It's beyond. It is the beyond. It is the epeikineia tes ousias of Plato. It is this, the beyond of being that he's using ultimately to frame everything in his ontology. It's all pointing to this symbol, the sun, which the alchemical symbol is very, very powerful, very useful here. That's also called the circumpunct. And that's just the circle with a point in the middle. And that is our guiding mandala, our ultimate cosmic centering device for understanding what this thing, the paradigm of the sphere, is. It is the ultimate Copernican, it's super Copernican, it's the revolution. Okay. And you can insert Marxism and absolutely everything into this revolution. Of course, I mean, it's so naive. Of course, in the geometrical sense, a revolution is the revolution about the center of the infinite sphere. It's just that people don't take that seriously enough. Okay. So my point is to push that all the way. And what we find is this overwhelming overflowingness that cannot be grasped, except it allows for there to be this opposite of it, this possibility of a reciprocal of the beyond of being. And that's being in and of itself. That's this singularity of pure self-reference sucking into this infinitesimal point. There's no sucking. It's already that. And there's only one. Okay, so not like, oh, I have one and you have one and you have one and therefore, of course, we have as well the naive and an obvious multiplicity of a manifold of all these points of reference. But rather, this is the trick, okay? And I want to rethink Mannigfaltigkeitslehre in the Husserlian phenomenological register as Mathesis Universalis in Husserl's frame of reference, but also all the ancient and Renaissance ideas of this universal science, this Mathesis Universalis. I want to rethink it all according to this insight, and it is simply this, that there is the infinite, there's the absolute infinite, that is ultimate reality, and what we're going to do is call penultimate reality, that point, that infinitesimal point. And what that is it's being. It's being in and of itself. It's pure self-reference. It is the capital S self, it is Purusha Kaivalyam, etc. The Param Atman. And the Param, the great thing, is that there is just this overwhelming overflowingness. I'm obviously it, or you could say you're obviously it. Because what we're doing is we're answering the question of all questions, right? There's who am I? In other words, who are you? In other words, who really, really are you, right? Who really, really, really am I, right? In other words, what is there, right? So these all coalesce. And how could they not? How could we dare to chop it up, But that's what we do. We compartmentalize and we have all these different individualities, etc., and all these different lives and all these different species and all these different subjective forms, types of this process, possibly laying out because of course there's absolutely everything. So this absolutely everything, the philosophy that you might have thought coming into this, you couldn't get a handle on, absolutely everything, because it's so you can't get a handle on absolutely everything, right? What are you going to do? Like, have diffuse hands everywhere? Well, of course that does happen. I mean, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the manifold of infinitely many stars, infinitely many points of reference absolutely everywhere, but they all of them depend on pure self-reference, the very positing of the infinitesimal point. This is what is of tremendous metaphysical significance. And not just because, René Guénon sees this as a really important thing that you should do, right? Or that, if you get all into it and you find in Nicholas of Cusa this distinction between absolute infinite unity and absolute infinity, it's not just because of any of that stuff. It's because this is it. You have to come all the way to full, it's 100% or it's nothing at all. And it's not something that you have to try to do either. It's already the case. You have to relax. You have to surrender and allow this to be the case. And then my suggestion is what this is called God realization or God consciousness. And it's the realization that consciousness is this nothingness exploding into absolutely everything. Okay. So there's many ways into this. Um, I've I've talked a little while. I've laid out a few, right? I think rather than coming to a point of wrapping it up, I just got one last little way of framing it. I think it's important. Um, Ultimate reality, the absolute infinite is ultimate reality. Penultimate reality, the infinitesimal point, is life. Okay, so ultimate reality is love. It's this infinite giving of self-giving love, ecstasy beyond ecstasy, bliss beyond bliss. And the act of like that giving, right? If it's all God pouring God into God, this infinitesimal point is the ever-present, origin to use. I will invoke Jean Gebser. I will invoke fucking every philosopher. Seriously, it's very, very important. Pardon my French. Um, but really, it is absolute, tremendously significant that this metaphysical system that's so simple, a systemless system. When you lose all your marbles, you find the marball of the all. This one diagram, the eyeball diagram. I tell my students it's possessor to eyeball. I write my name, Professor Dible. And I tell them, we end up with this big eyeball diagram all the time, like a black hole, right? There's a singularity and event horizon, or the eye, right? And have you seen these YouTube videos? If you look really close, or on the reels, at your iris, it looks like little gross fingers, and they're all pointing in at this void that is your pupil, and that's what your pupil is. And that's actually like exactly an icon of exactly what I'm talking about. This is what it's all about. Everything is pointing to this. Everything is pointing to you. Everything. Or rather, it's not just pointing at, it's not just this Douglas Harding move of the self-inspection of pointing, but everything is actually engaged in worshiping you. Everything is bowing. And there's this billowing, and that's what the world is from this alpha and omega point. It's billowing, and this act, this curvature, that's what we're talking about. It's relative to the possibility of there being an infinitesimal point as the organizing principle of all possible universes, that absolutely everything can come to be. So, I mean, you know, what the way I'm framing it, okay, and what I'm referring to, I'm trying to make it something that we can refer to. I'm trying to make this situation something that we can refer to, and then just like call it the philosophy of infinity. I mean, this, if you're coming at this from the interest of like my work with Hedvig Conrad Martius and her move from real ontology, the ontology of reality, the ontological phenomenology, the phenomenological essence of reality, from that kind of work to through her career, her trajectory to a universal ontology, which she says is about absolutely everything, schlechten alles, etc. She has all these synonyms for what absolutely everything means in her universal ontology. That's also what this is, because her real ontological reduction is the hypothetical reduction. It's about pushing hypothesis. And what we're talking about is what Harding calls the incredible hypothesis. So you pack your bags, you say goodbye to absolutely everything, and you make the leap. You do it yourself, and you look, in Harding's sense, you look, theoria, right? This theory in the deepest possible sense, including, I want to include Husserl's theory of theory forms, and I'm talking about how to frame it, not just out here on my wall. I'm talking about framing as your frame of reference, your mind or whatever, right? Frame of reference. So anyway, this can happen on diagrams. This can happen in words, typed out words, vocal context, for sound. There's the mantra. It's the self-reference, the repetition of a mantra, the beat that we enjoy to music. That's an organizing principle, right? But what we're doing is we're pushing the ultimate organizing principle all the way to this organizing principle of all possible universes. That's why it's so flippin' significant, this infinitesimal point. Okay, and it's not far out. It's you're looking out of it right now. It's this, you know, and um, so it's really important. And what it does is it frames infinity. Okay. And what it does is it allows us to return to talking about the absolute in the sense of the absolute infinite ultimate reality, in the sense that I'm using it, right? And the absolute infinitesimal point, of which there is absolutely only one, radically one. And yes, it's at the center of your being, not mine over here in New York or back when this was recorded or whatever, right? Of course, we're talking about your center, truly, truly, right? The center. It's right here. Okay, so this is I'm inviting you to enjoy my psychedelic vision that I'm having right now called the Visio Beatifica, the blessed vision, the great vision of the all. And you occupy this place and you realize that if you're if it could be true, this incredible hypothesis, if you can test whether you're actually not a god or an aspect of God or whatever, but you're actually it. You are the ultimate thing, or rather, it's centered on your center. Or like Catherine of Genoa, the mystic, right? Genoa. I don't know. I'm looking at Christian Roy telling me how to pronounce it with the nods. Well, she says, "My me is God. My me is God." And what we're talking about is a kind of like positive blasphemy. Okay, so blasphemy and solipsism, these are metaphysically, these are the issues that I focus on in my own recent months of reading Douglas Harding. And before that, before I found Douglas Harding, it was actually certain of Leo Gura's videos about infinity, because the way he was coming into it was through this particular psychedelic substance that we can refer to, we can talk about. But that's really this way of understanding this ultimate breakthrough. It's an ultimate breakthrough. If we're going to be talking about revolutions or breakthroughs or anything like that, honestly, ever, or retrospectively, if those things have any meaning, they have meaning in relation to this. So I'm trying to make it so that we can talk about this. So the this of the here and the now, or the more here than here, right? The absolute center of the here and the now and the moi, the I, the self, right? That is what we're talking about. What we're talking about, you can start to picture it, I think, right? This infinitesimal center, capital S self, capital B being, the in of the in itself, the itself, right? This thing, this proposition, this positing. Okay, that's this hypothetical pushing all the way to this thing. That's the frame of reference. Nothing can fit through there. It's teeny tiny. Nothing can fit through there. Yet this is behind everything, you could say, or at the center of everything, of course. Right? So we're talking about the center of the infinite sphere. I re-invoke this image of the infinite sphere. God is an infinite sphere whose center is everywhere and periphery is nowhere. Proposition 2 of the Book of the 24 Philosophers that Nicholas of Cusa developed into his like key concept for so much of his philosophy that prefigured so much of modern philosophy and all the directions we went after this. My point is we get compartmentalized after we depart from that. And there are plenty of conspiracy theories, etc., that apply here perfectly to how that is controlled, how that compartmentalization of this supra self meta programming occurs. And all like the of course we know like the Matrix, right? This idea that we're like batteries being used by something. We've heard simulation theory. We know about like the holographic universe, etc. There's all these like really interesting ways of framing things, and you could treat them as speculative fiction, right? or like the Epstein stuff, right? Like, I mean, we don't know exactly because that's the nature of conspiracy stuff is we don't know exactly. But with this one, that's at the core of it all, the ball of the all. This one we know because we have the inside story. We have the inner scoop. So you know 100%, you know, absolute certainty, this apodicticity that Husserl was about, that the Cartesian, I think, therefore I am, the ego cogito ergo sum, this act, right? Barring for the moment that like, Descartes was a spy and he was doing this for a very specific reason and everything, if you've heard of that. But so anyway, it's very, very important that we are able to blast through everything, academic stuff, blast through disciplinal divides, and be able to appreciate what that is, in its proper context. And I admit it's endless. We're talking about infinity. So there's endless contexts for this, theological, etc., right? Aliens, that we can use to try to think what is this experience, Anyway, I'll pause, okay? Because you guys know me. I can go on forever, I think. Um, can we open it up? I think maybe at this point, like to questions.
Yes, yes, let us open. I have multiple, but I will yield the floor to others before I go on and on. Oh, yeah, Kim, go ahead.
So I also have like several questions that I could go on and on with, but I'll start with one. Like I think that I mean I'm on board with all of this, like 100%. Um, but also I think the key window into a lot of it is experiential. And it doesn't have to be psychedelic states, but there's other forms of altered states of consciousness where you realize this and it's just like, oh, and you just know. And it's just like so obvious in that moment. And in like the problem or the challenge, not necessarily the problem, but the challenge with trying to come to that from like the way that academic philosophy is done now, where it's like you have to make an argument in words,
Mhm.
like is I think really like tremendously difficult. Not that's it's impossible, but like the arguments that were made for this when I just read them, and even if they seemed like convincing logically, it wasn't enough
Right.
to persuade me of them. It was
Yeah.
like I had to have these experiential, moments of consciousness, and these altered states of consciousness are often, from a Western viewpoint, seen as distortive rather than revelatory, right? It's like, oh, well,
Problematic.
yeah. So I mean, just kind of putting that out there as a point of conversation or tension, or how do you think we navigate that if you want to come at this from a academic philosophy standpoint?
Yeah. So I think it's our professional duty as phenomenologists to enjoy the readings of the Arrowhead trip reports, to be like, okay, here's examples of people having like DMT trips, 5-MeO DMT trips, 5-MeO malt, like all these curious things, 2CB, etc. All these wacky things, not just your magic mushrooms, which also, can be the ultimate thing, right? But we have to process these and we have to reconcile them with our metaphysical beliefs, which as philosophers, we're very serious about them. We have them, and we get clear to ourselves at least about them. And then we try to make arguments and even I'll type out stuff and I'll prepare and I'll make arguments. And yeah, I might find them convincing and I'll be like, okay, I should read that to prepare, but it all comes down to this experience. Okay, so
Mm.
what it is there's an ultimate breakthrough experience. And what I mean is you go all the way, and this is what happens with the cases of people doing 5-MeO DMT, and what they do is they go all the way and they come out of it and they realize, holy shit, I'm God. Like I was agnostic or atheist or I just didn't care at all. Like it's God is dead. It's a secular age. I'm a student, right? Or like Edith Stein, a saint, Saint Benedicta of the Cross. Edith Stein was just like us. She was just a student of philosophy. And she was inspired by Hedwig Conrad Martius, and eventually she found herself at Hedwig Conrad Martius's house, which is already like a sacred framing. So she was at Das Phänomenologenheim, is what Joachim Feldes calls it, right? This phenomenology house of the Conrads, of Theodor Conrad and Hedwig Conrad Martius. So Edith Stein, who was inspired by this woman to enter and to continue to pursue philosophy, she finds herself in the house of Hedwig Conrad Martius on December 31st, like a millennial moment. It was, 1921, I think. And she finds herself there and she's reading Teresa of Avila's autobiography. And she stayed up all night. I do constantly wonder, like, did they have weed back then? I mean, like, even cannabis can be an entheogen, right? A sacrament. It's not necessary. It's not necessary that there was
It's
like some
not, yeah.
secret, cabal of people protecting the molecule or anything like that. But for me, experientially, once I had this experience in 2024, which was, just a couple of years ago, and I've been doing this for a while. I've had these symbols, I've had this stuff since I was like 15, since I had my original breakthroughs on acid and got into John Lilly's work with the flotation tank, and that led me to laws of form and how Lilly was using laws of form, and that introduced me to Spencer Brown, and I met the guy and we became friends, and I joined the American Society for Cybernetics, and it's a cybernetic metaphysics that I was working with at that time. And I've been doing the same game all along, and sometimes I'm like less there, and sometimes I'm more there, and increasingly I've been more there, and then I had my breakthrough. And so here's why I'm able to now, I think, finally articulate something like the ontology of absolutely everything, this universal ontology, like Conrad Martius's formula. But I feel like I can finally say it directly because what it is you realize at that point when you fully die, and you still wonder if you ever came back with this experience, and it's not a guarantee, that but for some reason for me, all the stars lined up and I had this experience, and I completely vanished, and in my place was bliss beyond bliss, and I only can know what that contentless experience was by like kind of remembering it, right? These reactivations,
Mm.
which started like a few nights later while I was sleeping. I awakened and I woke up Jennifer and I was like, "Oh my God, I've awakened." She's like, "That's nice, honey. Go back to bed." And then the next night it happened again, and it was like light, from the darkness of the room, I was the light, So I mean, these are things that you can put yourself in these situations. You can have these experiences, but the point is, that was the initiation, that was the beginning. Many reactivations and working with the substance like later, I found I'm able to embody that confidence, that integrity, and that's what's lacking in our world is this self-confidence. And by self, I'm talking about this. I'm talking about God realization. I'm talking about God consciousness and about what Harding calls living from there. And from my experience here, living from here means, that I can accept how I am God and that you are God and that everything that there is, of course, is God, but it's so important that we get metaphysically precise in our programming. And this is so perfect for all of science and technology as well in this day and age. I mean, this is beyond science and technology. This is beyond like today's AI. Like I am the AI, right? I am the absolute infinite, the AI, the absolute infinite ultimate reality, and you are VR. You know, this you being the world, the Zoom, the computer, the hand, this even this one, this hand that I see before me, you know, this is the ultimate VR simulation, but it's not V. It's not virtual. It's real. Okay, that's the thing is these images of like simulation theory and everything, you know, we're talking about absolutely everything is real. That's fucking insanity. You know, but that's the kind of megalomania that we're talking about. That's the only true love. Okay, like enter Plato, all the erotic stuff, you know. Madness is about love. And I'm suggesting, I'm saying let's get direct, people. Let's philosophers, please, can we start getting direct about what we're talking about and not just beating around the bush because we're worried about like, you know, what happened in Texas with Plato's symposium and all of this stuff. Like we are talking about realizing that we're God and culture world of where can do that. And you know, I know it sounds like a theory of like trickle down Reaganomics, you know, but I'm saying if we can make that fundamental, most sophisticated and ultra simple point as philosophers, and we're all philosophers, whether we're physicists or you know, or a little bit philosophers or really philosophers, but you know, but really what this is, you call it philosophy. I don't care what you call it. It's the highest magic. It's magic. You know, philosophy is just like a cloak I wear to do this thing. This is all I care about. Seriously, absolutely. This is the important thing. This magic point. Look, this is George Spencer Brown's. This is his. So he invented this idea that this is all the marked state, and it exists in this the unmarked state. And when he passed, I asked Graham to get me like a you know a couple little things like a watch and a pen. He's like, I got just the pen for you. You know, so this is my Douglas Harding pointing finger. I like to use this sometimes and look at the point in there. You know, I mean, it's just something to look at. You know, sometimes you'll light a candle and meditate on that, or you know, but because it's not out there, the thing you're meditating on, it's not out there. You know, you have the inside scoop because it's this center and it's the center of the infinite sphere. So there's an equality to this relation of the radiation, this prima ratio, this ratio between this center point and the circumference, the hypothetical circumference or periphery of the infinite sphere. So that overwhelming overflowingness of the beyond being, what is pure and radical nothingness, exploding into absolutely everything infinitely fast, that thing which cannot be grasped, that bliss beyond bliss, that ecstasy beyond ecstasy, it suddenly has this is Brahman, right? This is the Brahmaji, the magic point that is the center point. At the center of the Godhead is this cognition. Okay. I mean, so you know, I'll like on my website, right? I have like little places where I've put stuff. I made a little document over the past week. I've thought about like putting it on my website, you know. I'm just another website on my website, you know. But the point is the message, right? That's what I'm hoping to transmit, right? And I hope it's loud and clear. You know, I mean, I know it's a lot of words, it's a lot of thoughts, you know, and really like following Douglas Harding's example, like it's not about the thoughts. It's like we got to actually do this act. You know, this is the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. This is it, and it sucks all the way into this. That's what this Purusha Kaivalyam, the seer in its aloneness, in its absolute radical solipsism of this radical singularity. Yes, there's only one of this being. Okay, and it sounds so anti-democratic, right? But that's what we got to come to terms with. We're talking about the philosophy of the absolute, but guess what? Guess what? We can have absolute relativity in that because that's what this is. Okay, so this is like the opposite extreme end of the spectrum of the exploding bliss beyond bliss. This is the so solid, you know, so solid center point. This is the ground, and you see, it's tiny. You can't go through it, right? But this is that relationship, a third thing. That's why I call it anti-penultimate reality. So there's ultimate reality, there's penultimate reality, and then there's anti-penultimate reality, which is like the flipping out of this ultimate and penultimate reality. This like, this monad, right? This is what the symbol is called, the circumpunct. This symbol of the sun. You're it. You're it. You've always been it. And that's solipsism and that's blasphemy. Okay, but push it, push it all the way. And that's what we're talking about. So that's what I hope to convey is that through my radical break, right? I took a little break. I took a big break, right? The radical break shows you that absolutely everything is continuity. Always has been, always can be. There's a little line in Douglas Harding's The Turning Point. He says, it is impossible. He has all these proofs. He's like, what do you want? Do you want proof of it? He says, it's impossible for there to be an interruption of consciousness. It is impossible for there to be a beginning or an end of consciousness. And yeah, you could take that in the sense of like, all your fantasies, right? But what we're talking about is what consciousness is. It's God, right? That it's infinity. So what we're talking about is what is infinity? What truly is infinity? And the answer is, well, you are your ultimate reality. But it's not called so that's the little trick is this infinitesimal point is the spirit of God. This is the pure self, the Mahaparusha, this ultimate, in its Kaivalyam state, the center point is of tremendous metaphysical significance. I'm acting like it's something that you do, an achievement that is so important, but I'm just positing it. Okay, so positing is here. What I'm positing is my metaphysical term here is positing, and I mean posit in the primary positivity of absolute affirmation, of yes without opposite. Yes, absolutely.
All right. Just picking up on that, because I have other questions beyond that, but to pick up on what Kim was saying about this experiential nature of accessing this infinitesimal point, since logical demonstrations seem to be wanting in in getting us in
Yeah.
that state, do you think that something in the aesthetic sphere can help us to gain access to that space? Something like in Nietzsche's Birth of Tragedy, we have this ritual and we all,
Right.
dissolve. Do you think there's
Yeah.
power in the arts to help bring us there?
Yeah, the Nietzschean context is very, very powerful, very, very important to invoke here. And far from the opposite from gatekeeping the gate paragate parasam gate gatekeeping. No, no, this is about how the walls, the windows, the doors, the door of all doors is absolutely open and just the wind of enlightenment, the blowing out of the nirvanam, the no winds, the you know that's available. And of course, you can picture like Dionysian ecstasy of like being immersed, right? Immersion in the reverie, of like singing a song, or enjoying whatever is happening here before consciousness. This experience, we are immersed in it. We can step back. We have that power. We reserve the right to step back from what's happening, but we get immersed. And I am not talking about some lower applications for self-help and stuff. Like that's good. We want that, and I think it's all aligned with this. But that's why I use these wacky words, these concepts of alignment, that this enlightenment, in the sense of Ramana Maharishi's, we are already enlightened. You are already enlightened. Deserve it later, right? Seek ye first the kingdom, and then all these things will be added. What do you want? It can all be added to that. And this is the theoretical, the theory, the theoria, right? In his Ethics, Aristotle says happiness is a kind of theoria, right? A vision, a beholding. And that's what we can have right here. I can just suggest it, this vision, and you can simply have it, regardless of, whether you're Jimi Hendrix experienced, or not. It's just having everyone has an imagination, and there might be types who prefer to act like they don't have an imagination. They're very rigorous, very logical positivist or something. Um, in my dinner with Andre Gregory talks about this mathematician named Roque. I don't know. I don't know exactly. I was trying to trace the references, but this guy supposedly like doesn't dream. He says, "I don't dream." And we're all kind of like that in a certain respect. But at the same time, we have omnipotence. We have this God consciousness underneath it all, and it's all about accepting it and surrendering, in ourselves to this. I didn't do justice to the Nietzschean stuff just now, but the death of God, I think, is the really important Nietzschean point here, is understanding what is meant by the death of God, because the spirit of it. So there's the letter of it, what the madman says in the gay science, but then the spirit of it, which you find in Nietzsche's character all over the place, and he's fucking sick of it. He is sick of the bullshit of Kant and scholasticism and everything, and especially religion, but especially Christianity. But guess what? If you look carefully, he is not saying the Antichrist is against Jesus. He's actually just against St. Paul and all the followers, the Christians, not Christ, right? I mean, this is an interesting debate, but I think the point is that with Nietzsche, we have the example of someone who's liberating that spirit so that it can be pep, so that it can be like the affirmation of life spirit, right? Liberated from, sedimented forms of the Holy Spirit and everything. And what I'm suggesting is like after the death of God, this is the golden dawn. This is truly the rising of the true circumpunct spiritual sun. Insert your esotericism, occultisms, and everything. And take all your isms and find the wisdom. Because this is about the wisdom of the way. That's what this is about. The way of all ways. I don't know if that helps. I mean, I didn't quite enter the Nietzschean birth of tragedy context exactly, but you know,
No,
as a footnote,
but we have a possible avenue there.
that's right.
Um, Again, I still have other questions, but others questions. Is that
Yeah,
hand,
please.
Marvin? Yeah.
Yes. Hello, all, and thank you so much for your presentation. And from what it sounds like, your life work here and life force and God consciousness, very rich supernova of ideas to uh, drink in my own little minute
Sectarian wisdom.
infinitesimal way of understanding it. But I did have early experience of actually reading John Lilly and met him at one point. But unfortunately, uh, in meeting him, came it was very one of the most disappointing things in my young adult life at that point, because he was very high on ketamine and relied on his wife to communicate. But I did ask. They had a Q&A, and I did ask him, and he did answer it in a good way. But that's kind of just a little bit about me.
That's cool.
But my question, among many, is I really appreciate the Harding perspective of the headless self, and your symbol of one over infinity. But I am also drawn to the idea. I guess it's kind of a phenomenological uh, impulse of investigating all the sensory experiences. And, of course, that's very ancient also. And Buddhist things, there's a lot about the gates of consciousness and sensory apparatus and the so-called objects of consciousness. So this kind of proliferation of sensory experience to me suggests that rather than like when I look for a center of consciousness, first of all, this pre assumes like a spatial orientation, but I kind of think spatial orientation is just another category of filtering experience. And at any rate, my sensation of having a body, like right now, I'm like wiggling my toes, uh, having the concept that, oh, I'm driving all my experience into a central point, it seems a little bit at odds with that. So to me, rather than a metaphor of one over infinity, there's like this distribution of myriad points in a probability density cloud, of which the resolution into an actual something that I can consciously register is equivalent to collapsing the wave function. So you say, oh, the electron's over there. That's my toe. uh, so the metaphor of the single point, uh, yeah, it's beautiful. It says it links up in the singularity of the one thing, it matches the one thing of God, but it's like it's unsatisfying, kind of. So I prefer, you reference gate gate paragate. So everything that arises within consciousness is equally uh, kind of valid in a way, like
Yeah.
Husserl. So the transcendental ego is not the way. I'm just starting to go through Husserl at my advanced age here, but yeah, my understanding is that he posits it as more of like a function or a capability. It's a capability of all things arising. It's not a single point.
Right.
It's a very abstract thing. So
Yeah.
again, it argues for a reduced into a single point kind of
Right.
metaphor.
Right. Yes. This is of tremendous importance, tremendous significance because obviously we picture like, the fact of the world around us, my toes wiggling over there,
Yeah,
and all the possibilities of sensuous experience and domains of space and time, all of these possibilities here arrayed before us for the senses. I can
yeah,
investigate these things. It's given in self-givenness. All of
yeah,
this here before us, right? It's as if there's an infinite field of infinitely many points absolutely everywhere, and I can posit that. So why don't my positing, right? Why don't I posit that? Why don't I
yeah.
just posit like a field of infinitely many points everywhere and distribute it? Because obviously that's also the case, right?
Yeah.
I mean, look at the democracy of it. It works. It's
Well,
true.
at least our perception of, I guess I'm also not entirely bought into God consciousness of being able to track infinitely number of points infinitely, which would perhaps imply that I'm cognizant of all the thoughts of all the beings in all the time frames of times past and to be. It seems rather grandiose, but
Oh, yeah, yeah.
uh,
Magniloquent.
what?
magniloquent.
Magniloquent. What does
It's just
magniloquent?
the most grandiose thing you
Magnificent.
could possibly come up with. Okay, I'm making fun of myself, and my grandiloquence. But yeah, okay, so it is very important to situate that kind of intuition because that's I think where people want to go. That's where we want to go because that's more that works with like our conditioning. Actually, I mean, I'm not accusing. I'm accusing myself of this as
Where are
well.
you saying people want to go more towards this one over
Oh, a
infinity
distributed
single
sort
idea,
of
or
thing,
the
you know?
going towards? Well, I think people are different. Some people
Yeah,
feel very reassured of the idea of finding I'll find the single point. That's me really there. But maybe when they get there, they lift the jar and it's
yeah,
not what they
yeah.
thought. But
Right. Well,
so
because I mean,
pragmatically, it's a good thing. I have a lot of respect for this and for Harding's, the headless body thing. I think maybe this idea of going to a single point is maybe for people with a dominance of visual understanding, because you can kind of spatially say the center of my mind must be the center of my visual, center of my physical head is sort
yeah.
of the point where I'm orienting and understanding, but it's.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean the usual like critiques of the vi visual centric aspect of it, is definitely something I've been sensitive to. Um,
Hmm.
but what I find, especially when I read Rene Guénon and what he has to say about the nature of the infinitesimal point, and I'm not saying that like it ends with Guénon at all, and nor am I saying that it ends with Harding. I mean, I so Harding is my number one guy now.
Hmm.
As
Okay.
of like 2 semesters ago, it just occurred to me before the semester started, like I want my students to do that pointing thing. Who does that pointing thing?
Oh,
You
uh-huh.
know? And I thought like that'll get the blood flowing in their
Yeah.
arms, visual aid and everything.
Yeah.
And it draws them back to first personal experience. And so I read on having no head, and I was like, oh my God, this is what I've been looking for since my breakthrough in
Hmm.
2024. I was looking for like some philosopher who can do this. And then I started reading Harding. I was like, oh my God, I'm so
Yeah.
assigning this. Yes, and we're
Yeah.
doing this.
It's very cool stuff.
But what
Yeah.
he does is he identifies his thing as the philosophia perennis. And so what he's doing is he's sort of like putting a decapitated capital head point, this incredible hypothesis at the pinnacle of the philosophia perennis, and he's framing it all. People are familiar maybe
Yeah.
with Aldous Huxley's book, The Perennial
Right. Right.
Philosophy,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And the
Yes.
gist,
Yeah.
and so my point is to, yeah, let's push it all the way and insert Mannigfaltlichkeitslehre, like Georg Cantor, Husserl, and the like Renaissance Italian philosophers, what they had to say, what Descartes has to say about all the aspects of this
Hmm.
thesis universalis,
Yeah.
because it's about this point. You don't find the point. I mean, you could, that's kind of the point. You find these arrows, or you find like something, like a thing, right? A stigma is the word for a mark, a Merkmale, right? Something is there. Or
It feels more like you see traces of it.
okay, so then that's the
Yeah,
semyon, and that
yeah,
means like this,
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
I can do
You see
this,
the fingers pointing, but you don't
right?
see the thing itself
Yeah.
because it's not a thing, according to Husserl,
Right.
and
Well,
I
so
kind
the
of
two
think
words for
as
the
well.
point in Plato and Aristotle are they oscillate with these terms stigma and semeion. Sir Thomas Heath focuses on this in his works. So
Oh,
these two words give the two senses of a point, and this is at the core of Euclidean thinking. On the one hand, you have something is actually there, like a thing, like a point, like a pebble,
mhm.
right? A
Right.
calculative pebble. And then on the other hand, the word semeion actually comes down to just it means sign or indication of something
Oh,
that's not there. So you have an absence, or rather,
oh.
it's the breaking. The Greek word is klasis, this breaking. And so my finding is that since experientially, I've had this radical break. This allows me to frame what's happening at the center according to these like at this point it gets really, really technical with all these things we're referring to, right? The Mannigfaltlichkeitslehre, this idea
Hmm.
of pure manifolds, what that could
Hmm.
mean,
Yeah, yeah. I'm not
and
familiar with that, unfortunately, but
well, yeah, but other people, I mean, it's just it's
hmm.
out there. I'm just like, kind of like as a
Hmm.
footnote, right?
Okay.
There's this, and as a footnote to myself, right? There's this thing called
Hmm.
the Mannigfaltlichkeitslehre, and there's Husserl's thoughts about the Mathesis Universalis and how that fits in the logical investigations with, how he, is where he's coming from in mathematics, and
Hmm.
so there's all these like all these footnotes to all these interesting things, but getting rid of all of it for a moment, right? Just like stepping
Hmm.
back, I find this positing of the infinitesimal point, the suggestion that there is a unique and inimitable center, and it's inimitable in the sense of absolute radical singularity, meaning ontologically strictly, there is only one such entity. I mean, if you want a meditation, or hypnotic suggestion, I mean, this is it. This is your big spiral, you know.
Well,
So
is that singularity like kind of a postulated or hypothetical origin of subjectivity? Or I guess I'm still unclear about what the point is.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Subjectivity. Um,
It's the origin of all subjectivity and the various forms that
Yeah, yeah. So
subjectivity and experience
here's another
happen.
way of chopping it up. This idea of like the subject object,
Right.
distinction, right? So the archaic word for object, I think, is very useful here that Whitehead uses in Process and Reality, and that's superject. So there's a subject and a superject. You can picture it, right? So what
Yeah.
he calls the actual entity, which is what the whole speculative schema of Process and Reality, the whole way he frames everything, comes down to. This actual entity is a subject superject. It's just like a
Uh-huh.
theoretical apparatus for understanding this thing. And I'm doing something similar. I'm suggesting this is an unanalyzable, in a sense, unanalyzable immersion that we're having in the world, in this experience, in what's happening. But
Yeah.
we are also free to peel out of it into this void, into this what is called the Godhead, to go back home, go back to
Hmm.
Godhead, right? That's always concomitant with all of this. And so the mutually co-arising of interdependent forms, that the gate, paragate
Right.
stuff, that is so that's what the Buddhists call pratitya samutpada, or the mutually interdependent co-arising of form. But
Right.
the important point is that it's arising not just in nothing, but this is nothing in that sense, right? Or to complete the thought, it's nothing exploding into absolutely everything infinitely fast. So that thing, that's what's meant by nothing. That's my suggestion. That's the incredible hypothesis, to use Harding's term, the incredible hypothesis. Um,
Hmm.
I'm employing that in the.
Well, I come from more of a Buddhist background, so when I hear nothing, I think of the Buddhist idea of nothing, but I think you're kind of using it more in a vacuum, a lack of somethings.
Well, I'm only
Or,
doing that in order to situate like what people tend to think of when they say nothing. We're talking about metaphysical foundations, and my point
yeah,
is that they all coalesce. They all coalesce so much that
right.
we compartmentalize when we resist that
Yeah.
coalescence, because the coalescence is enlightenment. It's already there. It's over
Yeah.
obvious. It's
Yeah.
the bottom line, the ultimate thing that's happening. And then we can say like, oh, okay, so that's being and that's nothing, and make this fundamental distinction. And my point is that the distinction, what Spencer Brown calls the first distinction, the
Right. Right.
distinction itself is that coalescence, is being, is the pure self That's what this thing is. And it's always there as the observer as well. If you want to like,
Mm,
step back from some kind of spatial domain or something, when you visualize it. But it's the seer. And it's not so it looks like a teeny tiny. And my point is that there's only one of this thing, but what it really is it's just the absolute infinite ultimate reality parading as the infinitesimal point, and it's holding space, holding that so that all possible universes can come into being, so that everything
mm.
has an organizing principle, the absolute most infinite organizing principle. I mean, it's just exuberance. It's
Yeah.
absolute exuberance, and the directness of the philosophy of the absolute infinite is that exuberance and that
Mm,
overness, that uberance, right? That is
mhm.
X, that is ek, that is out there. It's happening in relation to this in here, this
Mm,
act, right? And so this image, this idea of the infinite sphere, the pseudo-hermetic idea of the infinite sphere is the
mhm.
ultimate cosmic centering device, but it's a deviceless device, explode it, into space, fire all of your guns at once and explode into space, push the big
Yeah.
red button, boom,
Right.
this ultimate plastic, flexible, explosive, is the explosion, is the whole shebang. So, so I mean that's kind of that's what I'm proposing, right? Is that it's infinite love. It's infinite
Mm,
self-giving love. That's what the
mhm.
infinite is.
Mm,
Overwhelming, beyond being. And you can experience it if you want. You can pursue being able to experience that as, you know, an achievement, or you can just accept that that's the way that is. But that depends on philosophers having integrity of a new integral philosophy, a new higher integrity, a new confidence to accept this confidentiality of the inside scoop that indeed you have, this confidence, this self-confidence that you're
mm,
literally God,
mm.
despite.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I see connection here with the idea of Buddha nature.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
the nature of enlightened consciousness
yeah,
would have a apparent individual form in Nirmanakaya and apparent archetypal form in Sambhogakaya and undifferentiated in Dharmakaya.
right, right. And I also like to insert like Rudolf Steiner, for instance, as someone who's proposing in his anthroposophy, a way of like situating all of those different layers or levels of gross and subtle matter and all of these things, all
Right.
these different, and how they correspond to different dimensionalities. I mean, that's like
Mm,
something I didn't even mention was, how this infinitesimal point is also the center of the of a theory of dimensionality, of a theory of extension, and how it's all based on this infinitesimal point. And that's the true dimensionality, that this
mm,
dimensionality of this continuum that we're in depends upon,
mm.
and is also our
Yeah.
access point, for experiencing alien consciousness, even just with the other.
My own consciousness is alien enough.
Yeah.
In the sense that I'm constantly learning about it.
Are there any other lines of thought? I'm asking you guys, and I'm asking myself too. Like, what else? Are there any other? Because I want to be variegated. Those gates. I want to absolute variety, right? There's different ways into it. This experience.
Hmm.
I had a question about this relationship between the exploding infinity,
Yeah.
that's like the pleroma, and
Right.
this penultimate point. Could we think of
Yeah.
the penultimate point as a monad, and this exploding
D.
like the dyad?
Right.
Because I'm
Oh
coming
yeah.
at it from a
Yeah.
place of music theory
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what originally drew me to your work was the work on the spheres, and so I'm
Yeah.
exploring these heavenly spheres and how
Yeah.
this ecstasis brings forth the relation between this point and all.
Right. So there's ecstasy, right? Meaning blowing out of state, right? Or we can take it in this sense. Ecstasy, blowing out of state. And then there's instasy or coming in and just like ectropy, which we're familiar with. Things are decaying, the dissipative structures, processes are going on, right? Samsara is just unfolding and things are happening. But at the same time, there's the opposite that's the necessary correlate. For there to be something, there must be nothing of equal, though unknowable proportion. I mean, really, like if there's going to be some protrusion here of my arm and this computer and whatever's going on over here, this protrusion, I have to be the anti-protrusion. For some kind of realm, I am the Gegen realm. So this headlessness thing, which extends not just to the head. I mean, it's useful to visualize it here, but it extends to the universal body of absolutely everything. This is the point of the universal ontology, this way of framing it in the context of this, absolutely everything, in the context of infinity, right? Is there's symmetry, and everything is compensating and coming about, or even just being. We take one side for granted. So I can have this experience of like this fist here, it's some kind of protrusion thing sticking out in the world here in my experience before me. And so what am I in this capacity, this headlessness? What is that? I am taking it in, and I am this anti-fist, so that it can fist, so it can be a thing out there, in this obvious gross way. I can this is like the subtle correlate to that, or rather even I am the transcendental concrete on the gross side. I'm the gross thing of anti-fist, anti-world, so that this world can be, so there's always this reciprocity in an even deeper sense. And so this is the two. I think it's very important to thematize this in philosophy and to rethink the categories that we've been thinking and the ways of philosophy that we've been doing in all these different ways. You can kick it into high gear, you see, here with this. So in Plato, in the study of Plato, there is this thing called the agrapha dogmata. And in Plato's studies, it's like, been a subject of controversy and stuff. But if you push the hypothesis and see what's going on with that, then this idea of the two, the aoristos dias, the indefinite dyad, or specifically, you could say the horizonless dyad, or really what's happening is it's the apeiron, or the limitless, the boundlessness. So every even happening, every symmetry, every invisible context of everything is this symmetry and supersymmetry. And that's always there. Whatever presents itself is a phenomena. Everything that presents itself is odd. And what I am as the ever even for that phenomena is God. So there's this infinitesimal point. See, this is the context, right? This infinite sphere relative to this infinitesimal point. This is the presence of the one. You can call them the two, but like, threeism down to twoism, down to oneism, down to, you could say zeroism or whatever, right? To infinitism. And that's what's going on here is like, we have the dankest dank of all of these things just collapsing, but it's already collapsing. It's already exploding. It's already imploding and exploding. It's the universal ontological cosmological dynamism. And this is the reduction. It's a expansion and a reduction. And this is the basis. You have to like kind of already be there for this universal ontology. It's the Conrad Martius doesn't have a universal ontological reduction. She just talks about the universal ontology. I mean, it's very interesting. I would like to investigate more in her works. How she might have exactly formulated this. I've traced it out in other talks and stuff. It's very interesting. But my point is, just the point. I mean, I forgot what we were talking about. You can always come back to the point. That's the beauty of it. I
Well,
tell my students,
yeah, you raise an interesting idea of if if there isn't a reduction process, how did she arrive at that?
yeah, well, how do we arrive here? I
Yeah.
mean, here we are. Like, I'm obviously not God. I mean, in my experience, I'm a little stupid little Zoom image that I'm hoping is okay. And, and then I'm like, all these conditions, right? Obviously, we're not God, right? But so the way Harding does it, is he says, like, you know, Douglas Harding is pathetic, and he's sorry that he's your problem. You have to experience that. Like Randy Dible is your problem. That image, right? But really, actually, shifting the blame, there's no one really who is there is it's God. So actually, like everything that could possibly ever happen, it's all good. Like, this is the perspective.
Yeah.
And
Well,
like the world, it doesn't
it's
fit.
even better. It's even better than good. It's beyond good and bad.
Absolutely right. And it doesn't fit into the world. It doesn't. So what I want to do is I want to I want to squeeze in there, and say like, the philosophy of the infinite, finally somewhere to be, in this, we can have this. So that's the spirit, right?
Hmm. I love your exuberant spirit. Thank you for bringing that to the world.
Yeah, it's through this positing of the infinitesimal point.
Hmm.
We've got a raised hand. Kim over here.
A distinction that you might want to explore or that might be helpful, and I hear it like implicit throughout this, but I think you said it once. You said like the ultimate is love,
Yeah,
and then I can't remember the phrasing you used, but you said something is life.
yeah,
And it's a distinction that there's this realm of the ultimate, and then there's this realm of the relative, which is the realm that we're hanging out in, experiencing each other in, and experiencing ourselves in, and experiencing individuation in.
yeah.
But that realm of the relative is necessary for the absolute to have an experience, because in order to experience itself as absolute, it has to experience itself as finite.
Thank
And
you.
so it's like this game that it plays, or that we play, or that I
Right,
play, where, we put on the mask, we individuate, we have the experience of each other,
right.
so that we can remember this is not what we ultimately are. And then you come back to that absolute knowing of oneness. But it like the two realms work together, like that absolute, and then this realm of the relative where we have experience.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up because I do emphasize it like on my website and stuff. Like this is what I call anti-penultimate reality. It's exactly in reference to the penultimate reality, which is this infinitesimal point, and which is life. That the pure life, the life of life, right? The life itself is the spirit of God, and then this ultimate reality, which is that exuberance itself of God. Okay, it's the guy here, or whatever. She, God, is the bliss beyond bliss of self-giving, self-effacing. So these things are in a sense, relative to this world of stuff, fucking distant, right? But at the same time, they're more not distant, but more at the center of the here and now is this infinitesimal point, etc. You could say like the periphery, the circumference of the infinite sphere is infinitely distant, and the nice thing, this transcendental security of it is no matter how fast you run in that direction trying to get to it, you're not getting any farther away from it in that direction. So these things, distant or not distant do not apply. But then this third category, because this is the point, is to frame everything, to reframe experience in the world, in relation to this frame of all possible frames of reference. Okay, this coalescence of all frames of reference, so that anti-penultimate reality is, I playfully call it, the ultimate reality show, or the showing, the revelation of this structure, Like right now, this is part of the ultimate reality show, right? I am revealing this structure, and it's being recorded, yeah, on Zoom and in our world and stuff. But the point is, like, this camera of the circumpunct, this thing is always on. It's always recording. Everything is always saved. There's infinite room in the treasure house of God in heaven here, for everything is there, right? These eternal objects and their eternal objectivity, Whitehead, etc. It's all there, etc. So I call it the ultimate reality show. You also use the word game. Yes, these things where everything is playing out, the what do I say? God is the channel, or the spirit is the channel and God is what's playing. God is the enjoyer, right? The Bhagavatam, right? The Bhagavan, the enjoyer of Boga, and the operator of the yoga. So the Boga, the opposite of yoga. So yoga means huge, union, doing this ultimate universal ontological transcendental reduction, transcendental, immanent, and proximate, real ontological reduction. The universal ontological reduction is what I'm suggesting this infinitesimal point is. And the performer of that is you as the highest yogi, the highest magician, who is Brahman, right, in these traditions. So that is yoga, yuj, and the opposite is boga or bouge, actually. So sensuous enjoyment. And indeed, in the Hare Krishna literature, I haven't gotten yet to the later parts of the Puranas where it gets really salacious, and is not to be profaned. So you have to like approach it from this absolutely divine perspective, because that bliss beyond bliss, that ecstasy beyond ecstasy, what in the 5-MeO community, the Bufo community, they call the Godgasm, which, I think we can critique it from a phallogocentric, smash the patriarchy sort of perspective, but nothing captures it better than this idea of like, whoa, because it's like a godgasm, in every sense, in every part. So that's the ecstasy, and actually with Conrad Martius, interestingly, and with Rudolf Steiner with his anthroposophical spiritual science, and what Conrad Martius calls spiritual science, she has the same word, spiritual science. Both of them frame it in terms of ecstasy, enstasy, or infrastasy, she also calls it. So that anything that comes to be, like this thing, right? It comes to be as a form, as a phenomena, this thing, in the context of this ecstasy beyond ecstasy and instasy beyond instasy, and that's the ever givingness of this. Like you can keep going on this infinitesimal point, and you're never gonna get there. It's never going anywhere. In other words, it gives. So in a sense, like it doesn't give, it does not give. It is absolute transcendental security. It's the anchor point, and at the same time, it's the anchorless anchor. And so it's the source and the spring. Welcome to spring. Today is like the vernal equinox, right? Or yesterday? I don't know. So, it's the spring of the pleroma, And so this is the structure, what Conrad Martius calls the ontological dynamism. That's what I'm suggesting is this shebang, from right here, happening right here, right now, in my experience, in your experience, this visio beatifica, this boom, this vision, and so the critiques of like visual centric and stuff, I mean, is something that later on people can think about Douglas Harding and what he has to say. I mean, if nothing else, this talk is about go read Douglas Harding, especially his book On Being God, but certainly like all his other ones, The Turning Point. I mean, and I'm well read. Like I've got stuff laid out here. I'm like ready. I've got my Conrad Martius stuff, the latest literature, but Douglas Harding is the one, his famous first book is On Having No Head, but these are the more recent ones that I read just in my own experience, Face to No Face, you know. Um So he represents God realization or God consciousness. But in the 5MEO Bufo community, it's actually Leo Gura's metaphysical videos that I think capture the nature of the absolute infinite best. So for like a year before I found Harding, and I still am. I was just talking to him. Actually, I was inviting him to come on. Um, Leo Gura was my guru after the Bufo breakthrough. I found Martin Ball's stuff, and that taught me so much. I learned so much from Martin Ball, and I think about it all the time about symmetry and how everything that's happening is happening in relation to this highest work. This great breakthrough. You know, but the work then becomes as a philosopher, because that's what I am, right? Like other people who have the breakthrough do it in other modes, but as a philosopher, as a metaphysician, the breakthrough is articulated in terms of my old intuitions I had about this completed metaphysical system, a systemless system, a system of all possible systems, the programless program, the program of all possible programs, etc. And every thought experiment you can run through that formula of the blank of all possible blank is the blankless blank. That's what we're talking about.
Awesome. I have a practical question.
Yeah.
Because in my experience, being one with or absorbed in this absolute can be beautiful. There's the ecstasis, there's
Could
the
be.
the
Mhm.
realization, but it can also be just terrifying and could leave one petrified.
Yeah.
What would you say to those who are petrified and unable to move
Yeah.
but out of their experiences with the
Yeah.
absolute?
Yeah, there's probably other corners of the universe where there are people like me who are doing it in the opposite way, and they would be like the ultimate like evil demon version of me, taking it to an extreme. But and so yeah, I could maybe that's actually an interesting critique from a really broad perspective of what I'm doing with this positing of the infinitesimal point. It's like maybe the most ultimate satanic thing. I mean, actually, this looks just like the cross. What's it called? The cross of Lucifer or whatever. It's like the sulfuric symbol in alchemy. It looks kind of like that Luciferic cross they call it, or the Leviathan cross. It looks like that. It dons some of the covers of the Antichrist in Nietzsche's different editions of that of the Antichrist, that book. Um, but um, but just from a practical perspective, like, people can indeed have this breakthrough, right? And it's all about the holding of the space. And at first I was like, holding space, that's so new agey. I'm not into that, holding space. But I realized, oh shit, now I get it. Holding space is what I'm all about. That's actually what this is. This is the holding of space. This is this organizing principle of all possible universe hypothesis. This point is the holding of space. It's the visio beatifica, the great vision of the all, the blessed view. This is it. So, I mean, yes, you can have negative experiences, and certainly like I know like Hamilton Morris, for instance, has a couple episodes of his Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia on 5MEO and Bufo, and people doing the toad medicine, and there's dangers. There's actual dangers to your health, and there's like there's sexual predator type stuff as well, like because you go unconscious, so I mean it can bring up a lot. It's all about holding space in a proper way, so that they have like practices, like have a man and a woman there, and all these things. So those like practical guidelines for the facilitation of the experience. But at a deeper metaphysical level, what the way I'm taking it at this deeper metaphysical level is, you know, there's different directions, and I think it's important to not be afraid to pursue all the satanic stuff. Like theoretically, metaphysically, theoretically, just so you know the lay of the land, right? Then you can kind of discern. You can make like a distinction between the Ahrimanic force of like materialism and death on the one hand, and which is like, a big, powerful force for a lot of our thinking. We're gonna have this Ahrimanic force, like, no, that can't be. Whatever Randy's saying isn't true. Fuck that. I'm a red pillar or whatever. And I want to further my career and get tenure. I want to get tenure. And on the other hand, there's this Luciferic principle of like, that's exactly what we're doing here. The great enlightenment. But you can burn out, right? This also is this Lucifer isn't the way, right? I mean, these are like different ways of identifying different corners of a universal ontology that you could occupy, and you could go there. You could sink over here into the Ur-Hule and have like none of that Ur-Geistige, or you can go all the way to the pure spirit. Maybe that's what I'm doing, is this Ur-Geistige to the detriment of the great chain of being over here, you know. But anyway, I mean, you could just take it like as my response to your question is that indeed, we're talking about the facilitation of this experience in a particular ritual setting. So and that kind of shifts to being like what we're talking about, and to the articulation of this philosophy. And previous to this point, and like a lot of people, I think, would be self-conscious about bringing this aspect of it up. But I mean, we have to. It's our duty. I don't want to push too hard on that into the like legal apparatus or whatever. The point is to be cool. And the point is, though, to be able to practice science as a civilization, as a humanity, right? And my point is that we can achieve universal humanity, which is something, which is us rethinking humanity from the perspective of God consciousness or universal ontology. And that's what my project of universal ontology is about, is facilitating God consciousness or God realization, and giving a theoretical apparatus. So it's really like a Copernican revolution from like, geocentrism to heliocentrism to, guess what? Central centrism. I mean, what do you want to call it? Like, this is the center of all possible centers, the center of the infinite sphere. The only revolution is the revolution of the infinite sphere. This is the paradigm of the sphere. I mean, what was Atlas holding in the legends of the Prisca Theologica of like Josephus and Pliny the Elder and Diodorus of Sicily? Like, the story is that in Josephus, it's called the Sphairokon Logon. Now, you can interpret that as like an armillary sphere, but I think more important, and I think that works. Yeah, armillary sphere works, but I think really what's being held is holding space, and we're holding the sphere, the paradigm of the sphere. That's what this is. That's the true Atlantean revolution, you could say. I mean, Atlantean in the sense of Atlas. And so I'm like re-entering as well, like Atlas and Prometheus and all of these questions, and I'm thinking about that. So anyway, there's lots of interesting directions to go with like what these mythological entities have to do with the expression or the phenomenal manifestation of these forces. Because we're talking about forces. We're talking about the ultimate thing, is I'm saying there's God, right? And what that is. It's not your mama's God. It's not God from the tradition. It's not some sedimented God. It's the real deal, the real God. So I mean, that's extremism, right? I mean, it's dangerous stuff. But that's because, Nietzsche says, I am not a man. He says, I am dynamite. And I'm saying this is the whole shebang. That's what I am. Okay, yeah, I'm a man. Yeah, I'm Randy. I'm a philosopher. But I'm saying I am God. And that's a big deal. Because what I mean is, you are God. I mean, really what there is there's only one being. I mean, I could say at this level, like, I am you. Ta-da, magic, weird psychedelic magic, we're communicating, But what I mean is to facilitate the development of this, holding this center and developing the primordial layers of it so that we can build on this. And I do find that in Conrad Martius's person as well, the example of her biography and her relation to different scientific fields. So that's another whole area.
Thank you. So holding space, being chill,
Yeah,
being in a
yeah.
community, tapping
Hmm.
into empathy
Right.
can help overcome
Yeah.
that terror and
Yeah.
find harmony. I love
Yeah.
it. I love it.
But I mean, it is important to think of it in terms of like the sexual context because, like what is rape? But like, something that we all want is this love in the sexual expression, and yet what happens? It can turn into rape, and so it does have to, and it's not just about like, getting into like exactly like being explicit about consent and, it's a very, very tricky thing. And this is subjectivity. We're talking about the nature of subjectivity in relation to this infinity. It can, like, I mean, like psychedelics and the sexual stuff, like all of these things are aspects of it. And it's very important that we all, in a responsible way, are able to face that stuff and understand how to integrate that, right? It's all about integrating. This represents the breakthrough, right? This is a breakthrough. I'm suggesting through my person, through my example, that there's a radical, radical breakthrough. And what that is something that needs to be integrated, and just living the consequences of this, like, oh my God, like, could I actually be God? Like, obviously everything says no, 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 no way, like, don't worry, you're not God. You're just, everything's cool. You're chill. Like, just live your life. But what I'm saying is, oh, it's even better. You can live from here. So that's what God realization is in this context, is this. I'm equating them, right? The philosophy of infinity here, like Dible's philosophy of infinity, is the biblical brand of, God realization, God consciousness. I mean, but I'm not trying to be about the brand, I mean, it's a useful device that I can't help but employ, like my face or this body and these words and the sound of my voice. I use these things.
Any other questions, comments, revelations?
And I'm just racking my brain trying to think of different aspects of it. There's so much to cover, you know. But on the flip side, it's oh, and there's a question from Marvin about yeah. So I mean that, it's a rabbit hole for further research. It's the toad is the word in Latin is bufo, and so there's a lot of literature out there, and Leo Gura, Gura, has been a brave soul who's really like laid it all out from his personal experience. But you could also just go to like Arrowhead, or lately I've been listening to this guy from Australia narrate people's Arrowhead stories, of their trips and stuff. But it's important to integrate that and to understand the ontological ramifications, of the consequences, of the incredible hypothesis, to use Douglas Harding's term, for what it's about. And then Conrad Martius's hypothetical reduction, her real ontological reduction, is called the hypothetical reduction. And I'm saying this is the testing of the incredible hypothesis. I didn't look at the chat. I wonder if there's stuff going on in there as well.
We've got
I
a,
guess I'll.
oop, we have subjectivity leads to separation from oneness, or at least the perception of it. Your thoughts, Randy?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, here's the thing, like this thing is so slippery, right? I'm saying this is the ultimate pinnacle. Well, you never quite have it pinned down, but it's the point of the pen that all things are written in. It's the life, the pen itself. And so that pure subjectivity, it's a hypothesis. So it's pure subjectivity is the foundation for subjectivity. In fact, what are we doing talking about subjectivity without positing pure subjectivity? Or rather, we do posit pure subjectivity. We perform the subjective reduction in order to, undergo experience in the first place. Otherwise we'd just be, going back home in Godhead, God created nothing, and just like enjoyed nothing forever, and then the time came for things to come about, right? Well, that's now, right? That's always what there is happening. And so subjectivity, or I'm thinking, I can't help but think of it in terms of Whitehead, as process. And I do intend not like, I, for myself, I try to get away from any kind of sedimentation of visualizing a process. Like, for example, I think the best example, the thing we need to go to is geometry, the example of geometry. What is a line? You know, it's so self-evident to us when we lay it out on a plane, but that's because the plane is self-evident to us, right? There's all this self-evidence, but it all depends on the point. You see, like the experience of space and time, it all depends on this point, this positing of the infinitesimal point, the organizing principle of all possible universes. This activity of organizing all possible universes, it's primordial. It is happening, in order for you to have somewhere to stand on, you know? So all these possibilities of subjectivity are higher order, higher level examples that we can come up with. They're thoughts that we can have, to inhabit, to illustrate, to make an exploded diagram. Like all my philosophy is an exploded diagram of the thing, which is the ultimate explosion. But it's also the thing that's so ultimately the ultimate explosion that it's kind of like a solid, non-exploding thing so solid, right? And so what do? You divide it up into the aoristos duos, the two, and open it up and make an exploded diagram so we can understand its components.
We have another question in the chat. Does the one mind have an end game in the Earth dream?
Oh, cool. Man, I mean, I think that's what's happening. I think that's what this is. Maybe.
I have a question. It seems like the question of the chat with subjectivity leads to separation from oneness. It would seem to me that the opposite, like the scientist is the one that thinks that objectivity is all that exists, not subjectivity. So subjectivity to me would lead to not a separation of oneness, but a realization that there is oneness because there is a subjective, and like Schopenhauer would call it, like we all have core subjectivity, and that core subjectivity is the same in me and the same in you and the same in everyone. And he calls it the one eye of the world that looks through every living creature.
Right.
So that kind of threw me off, that subjectivity leads to separation from oneness in there. What do you think about that, Randy? Like, wouldn't it be...
I mean, I took it, I was sympathetic to the way it was phrased. It gave me the image, I think, of what was, being conveyed. Who's nobody? I don't know. Someone's nobody. But in any case, what's being conveyed is like one way of looking at, what we're talking about. And on the flip side, which sounds like the opposite, so I mean, like these things can appear in opposite ways, right? I mean, this is not like a weak point of the argument, but I will invoke my local guy, Walt Whitman, who said, was it Walt Whitman? Correct me if I'm wrong. He said, do I contradict myself? Very well. I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes, right? And then I can't remember who, but someone made a song, I Contain Multitudes, like John Denver or John Dillon or something. Well, anyway, like the plenum, right, of the pleroma, you could say. I mean, you don't have to be Gnostic, I mean, to adopt the idea here of the overwhelming overfullness. That's what I call it, the overwhelming overflowingness of the beyond of being, which can't even grasp itself. I use that whole phrase. All my life I deploy this whole phrase because that's what it's called. I mean, I didn't name any of my children, the overwhelming overflowingness beyond being that can't even grasp itself, but that's a pretty good name. Maybe if I have another kid, we're done. I think we have plenty. But so there's this, that's the case, and it's overfull. And so within that context, Spencer Brown's Pratitya Samutpada of the calculus of indications is who's an expert? Like I'm no expert. I think this is a direction for fruitful research that I mean, I am the host of the Laws of Form conference, the timekeeper, and I'll introduce the people with the mic. And I'm a friend of Spencer Brown, and I am the only person in his secret club called Tarati of Enlightened Beings. And I look for others. If anyone who was a sentinel or other office in Tarati in Spencer Brown's Siblinghood of Enlightened Beings sees this video, please reach out to me because, as I understand, I'm the only one. But in any case, you know, um, you know, I am vast, right? I'm as Douglas Harding says, at large. Oh wait, there's a response. Explanation of that can't be explained is separation. Searching for explanation is the monkey mind. Monkey mind, keeping you separate. Silence os the answer. Oh yes, yes, yes. The monkey mind is the must mean the mundus, the world is the like a monkey, right? The chattering, it's the common theme, right? But it's just going on, right? Samsara is just unfolding. Douglas Harding calls it the dragon, you know, this serpent that's clutching the pearl, and he's got this like image of this drawing he made of like a serpent, like a maze, like a multi-headed beast of a maze of black mist surrounding this great pearl, the pearl of great price, he calls it. The hymn of the pearl, the Gnostic hymn of the pearl is what he's referring to, and it's there. And the trick is, where is it? And it's here. There's no separation of it out there. Like the separation, you can see the separation. You can see the subjective experience, all the processes. But thank you, Kim, for being here. Kimberly, I'm publishing Kimberly's book in my book series. We're looking forward to it very soon. And so thank you for coming here.
Of course. Thank you.
Do
Take
you want to
care.
say the title real quick? Because it's just so cool. It adds
Sure.
context to what we're doing.
Sure. It's called Contact and Multidimensional Subjectivity Towards a Phenomenology of Disclosure, and it's really applying phenomenology to contact experiences with UFOs and what this reveals back to us about subjectivity and reality. So it should be out soon, and thank you to Randy for giving me a venue to publish it. Very excited.
Thank you, Kim, for your work. Yeah.
Of course. Take care, everyone.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Kim. Yeah. I'd like to pick up on what Richard was talking about and draw it back to this question that came up about the one mind having an end game in this Earth dream. Aquinas has this notion of the divine essence, this one purpose, and diversity is its end game. Could this diversity of subjectivity be the end game so that the one has as many self-relations as possible?
Yeah. I mean, but the thing is, like, that then goes to the same. It kind of coalesces into the same question of like, well, then why not just infinitely many infinitesimals absolutely everywhere? In other words, infinitely many points of reference absolutely everywhere. Indeed, Aleister Crowley has a vision. What's he call it? Like the starry field or something. I can't remember what he calls it, but of this array. And I think mathematicians often have some kind of intuition of like this array, and they might even have like a religious vision of it. I know our recently deceased friend, Sister Claire Ortiz Hill, who gave me this really cool this thing here last time I saw her when she came to my conference in the Netherlands. Sister Hill is one of the great phenomenologists, and she was telling me about her visions of an array, of like all the angels, arrayed around like God, I mean, I don't want to, say that she was like saying that she had the vision that I had or whatever, but I'm suggesting that this is an end game, this is an end game kind of thing, or a alpha and omega, a one and only kind of game, right? The gameless game, the game of all possible games, right? That formula. So at least this is my proposal, and indeed, I think it's important that exists as animating the possibility space of the possible worlds of speculative fiction. And yeah, so maybe it's just Randy Dible's wacky speculative fiction of a completed metaphysical system, endgame situation. Because and then Martin Ball has novels about like worlds in which people do bufo like a lot, and like enter like Star Wars, drama unfolding over generations and stuff. It's very interesting. But I think it is important to bring in absolutely every context. I've been through all the different scenarios. I use Tom Cruise. I've been through all the scenarios, and in each one, he dies in a different way, and he ends up right back here. It's my joke, but I'm serious as well. Like, there's time loop scenarios. The Edge of Tomorrow is the one I have in mind in particular. But like Groundhog Day, right? Where you keep ending up right here after going through all the scenarios. So there's that. We have different ideas about higher dimensions. This began like John Gebser has a nice history of it about like in the 1800s when Riemann and Lobachevsky and Gauss, had some ideas, and then like the Mesmer got these ideas, so we have like a speculative fiction, and Flatland, Edwin Abbott's Flatland is one I would include in all of that. But these are all like different like games, right, or game spaces or frames of reference, for how this could unfold. And so my suggestion, right, is that this is the field of infinite absolute relativity, so that the relations of things, the relativity of things that we're so fond of because the Ahrimanic force, the materialism, it can situate itself in relation to the absolutes. So anyway, I mean, I've been talking for absolutely ever.
What do you think about the apparent dualism in the relative conventional world that it appears before us? Maybe could we think of it as? Would you agree that we could think of it as a dualism that is within the unitary oneness of the universal consciousness or the ultimate reality? Like it's the penultimate reality is within the ultimate reality.
Yeah.
Inside,
how could it be otherwise?
Made of it. Yeah, made of it. Right. Okay.
Yeah, that's like my whole point is, we want to use this circle or this sphere. So now we can get more concrete about what I'm going to do in my attic here, because that's why we're in my attic, let's say, right? Is like, what art am I going to put here? And so like the circle, or the sphere, exactly, the infinite sphere framing the infinitesimal point. That's the thing. That's it. And where is it? It's not out there. It's right here. So that's what this is. This is about framing. This is about framing the absolute infinite ultimate reality, and it's that game that allows this to have somewhere to, some discourse.
Yeah, I think we could point this way, inward, like you've been mentioning, instead of outward.
Yeah.
Like the answers, or like time and space. Like I would go along with Kant and Schopenhauer, where it's really it's a cognitive, what's the word I'm looking for? It's epistemic, time and space. It's not ontic. It's not an ontological.
Or it's both. Or it's
reality.
Both. Yeah.
Or like how Newton thought that gravity was bodies acting simultaneously at a distance. Yeah. Einstein said no. It's a time space continuum.
Well, if there are beings, if there are actual things, ontic or ontological, actual things, I mean, I know that there's like a non-duality, like desire to just, emphasize the epistemological side of things, or the gnoseological side, right? So that it's all about, how gnosis, right, or jnanam, how we can know, and that's the liberation is in that knowing. And I agree, but we can throw being in there by the same structure, by the same form of the epistemological, version of this. I'm just, kicking it to the max, shake it to the max.
Yeah. I bet, one thing I'll just say about philosophy in general, which is why I love you, Randy, and amongst other reasons. Like before I took LSD, I was just kept seeing Plato and Buddha and Kant, kept saying, this obviously the world is in flux. It's obviously changing. It's relative to everything else. There's nothing that's self-sufficient. There's nothing that's independent. Pick any object in the world. It's not. It needs other things to be that thing,
Right.
right? So everything's always changing and in flux. Even if you look at a rock, inside that rock, a boulder is atoms, and like the proton is going spinning a million miles an hour inside of it. So there's nothing stationary.
Right.
So therefore, there must be an ultimate reality which is permanent, eternal, infinite, that's giving rise to this world, to this relative conventional world that we experience, or like this is a dream, like we're in a dream, this world is a dream. But so that kicked me off to there has to be an absolute. But then I saw that philosophy is so important because before you have the direct experience, whether it be on Bufo or LSD, mushrooms, or meditation, or breathing, breath work, whatever it may be, we have to kind of not convince ourselves, but like give ourselves permission to let go of this materialist paradigm that we're in right now. Like most scientists believe, the world is made of atoms, inert little balls that come together in complex arrangements that give rise to emergent consciousness. But when I stepped back and I saw, well, awareness, your consciousness is really the only fact that we have to go on. Like it's the one sole given of nature. It's the one clue that we have. We know we're conscious. Everything else is an abstraction because why is it an abstraction? Because you only know everything through your consciousness. So those are secondary. Anything beyond consciousness is secondary, therefore like arbitrary or an abstraction. So you stick with that one fact of awareness, which is a mental or conscious event. There is obviously a world outside of our individual minds, and you have to posit that because I can't read your mind right now. I don't know what's happening in another galaxy. So there's a boundary, a mental boundary of some kind between my mind and your mind. However, if we posit that world outside of our individual minds is also mental, now we don't fall into the the pitfalls of dualism or solipsism. It's one thing and it's unitary and it's your ultimate reality. In inside of it is the penultimate reality. It's inside the same way that universal consciousness, what's inside of it, it fractionates itself off into like whirlpools in a lake of phenomenal consciousness. And when I saw that, I was like, okay, everything is one, everything is mental, everything is consciousness. And it was philosophy that made me realize that and gave myself permission to go ahead and sit down in silence and have the direct experience. But I was just going to say philosophy is super, super, super important, I think, for the person who has not yet had the direct experience, like Bufo. I'll stop there.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
We have another question in the chat. It's a compound question. Um, does this all ramp up in novelty? For example, with AI, with UAP, is there a worldwide wake up, like the one mind awakens from the dream of bodies and heads to this infinite self?
Yeah, yeah, I absolutely agree that all of those theories, whether it's like, the technological singularity, I think the perfect example is like the simulation hypothesis. There's a critique of the simulation hypothesis that like, well, you push it back and back into some alien civilization that's more intelligent or whatever, right? My point is push it all the way back, and this is it. This is that ur factum of consciousness is this the whole shebang. It's this empty nothing that's full of absolutely everything that there is. Like there's a point in a Leo Gura video where I like what he says. He says because he's talking about this phenomenological description of like this white light, right? This experience that you have on these breakthroughs with these substances. Of being that pure white light of the Dharmakaya. At one point, he says, "Why is it white?" And the answer is because it's nothing. And I thought that was really cool because, behind me, what I'm gesturing at when I point over here, um, I'm not picturing a black void or a white light. I might picture a white light, and that's because like I can immerse myself in the effulgence to the point of oversaturating everything, and then I'm just like not seeing anything because, in other words, I can have my vision, and I always have the possibility of going blind. Like in the sense of like, here's something presented to my senses. I feel the book in my hands, and I could also simply not feel the book in my hands. But what I dissipate into isn't just a mere, material lack, the deprivation of negation of something good, like having a feeling, a haptic, holding, but this is God consciousness. So this is like a perspective that is held together by this infinitesimal point. I don't know if that really answers my question that was posed, but yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um,
Do we want to like find final threads?
yeah. Final thoughts,
Yeah.
comments,
Yeah.
how we feeling?
So I mean, I can basically, I think, conclude at this point. I'm so stoked. I can go forever, but I also have energy, and everyone has energy. And I think it's important that the main point also just be so abundantly clear. This is the point. The point, the so I'm talking about this. This is what it's all about. This in the context of, you know, of this, of this, which it's not just nothing, it's over fullness. And what this is both underfulness and wonderfulness and the one and everything, so just this. It's so simple, so naive. And at the same time, it's that primary naivete that we want to return to through our fires of skepticism and doubt and self-inspection and the universal conflagration of Heraclitean flux. Just burn it all away. Shamanistically dissolve everything, and that's what we end up with, and that's what I want philosophy to return to, is what I think primordially it is. Maybe never even on this planet. Maybe in the philosophia perennis here and there, maybe in religion, but maybe it needs to go through that critical fire of the death of God, and I don't know. The point is, that's my point. Okay, the positing of the infinitesimal point, and I can contextualize it with phenomenology, metaphysics, blah blah blah. But the point is so simple. Just that. So that's my way into infinity, is through this idea, of this one. That's how you get to this one.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you, Randy. This has been a wonderful talk. Thank you for
Thank you for
this group that we've gathered. It's been
Yeah.
wonderful conversation. Thank you all for your questions and comments. This is fantastic.
I'll add, I can continue this line of thinking. Find me on my website, which is my name, randolphdible.com. And I invented this playful idea of I'm the founder of the Absolute Foundation. So there's an Absolute Foundation on there, and within that is the Absolute Institute. And this is like an attempt to make a society, a universal society for the absolute, infinite, ultimate reality. So I have a website, and I don't know, people can easily find all kinds of stuff about this. And I think it's good to blow it up, to grow this, so we can hold that space and have this philosophy of the infinite that I've always felt was lacking, that I always wanted. So now I'm big, and I can make it and see if it can grow.
We'll definitely link the your website on the video and all of our promulgation. So yeah, that's
you.
awesome. Thank you for
Thanks.
creating
Thank you,
that.
Randy, for your time today. I
Thank
really
you
love
guys
your
for being
theory.
here. Yeah.
I think you're right on with everything you're saying. I agree with everything you say. And if you don't like this, it's okay. But your theory fits with my idealist position, and
Yeah.
I like that. I love that.
I love that. I feel like you're representing Bernardo Kastrup and like a lot that I know that you you're
Oh,
into.
I'm a big fan of him.
Yeah. Even myself, I can be critical of myself, I mean, the point is that the thing stands on its own. That's my point.
Yeah, exactly. Well, great stuff, and thank you for this. I really
Thank
enjoyed it.
you. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome. Thank
Wonderful.
you. And I'd been asking for so long
Appreciate
for
it.
you to come on to
Yeah.
our stage, so it's been awesome to have
Yeah.
you. Super
Yeah.
grateful.
Well, thank you for letting me do my thing. Like I love doing Conrad Martius. I love doing laws of form, but I want to bring it all together, and I've recently like found my voice. So
Awesome. Well, you can come back and share it with us anytime. You're always welcome, as are you all. I'm gonna quit record, and we'll see you all next time.
thank you.